and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality, to make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda, the power of dreams.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
And there you have it, the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. The opening bell report being brought to you by SEI. Asset managers don't get results that are off the charts when their solutions are off the shelf. Learn how SEI's operating platform can turn infrastructure into a competitive advantage at SEIC.com/IMS. Mixed market at the open. Dow Jones Industrial Average out of the gate up about 9 points right now, 25,713. The S&P 500 pretty much unchanged at 3152. And the tech-heavy NASDAQ Composite Index right now down about 6 points. We're at 10,544. Among the movers early on, American Airlines right now down 0.6%. And gentlemen, since the March lows, S&P 500 right now is up 53%. Wow. That is your opening bell report.
Well, this is extraordinary, and it's always good to have John Tucker with us. John, I look at, the move that we've seen in March, and this brings us back to tearful memories of the opening of the 401k envelope.
Don't you miss it?
I miss it. I mean, I'm in the triple leveraged all cash fund, and so there's no need to open my envelope. How's it been going?
I've also switched to electronics, so there's no longer the sound of me ripping up the envelope.
That's crushing.
So how sad. No, you know what? I'm honestly, I did take a look at it yesterday, the last quarterly report, and it's I'm back to square one pretty much since the beginning of the year.
Rounding back to 1985.
I'll chalk that up as success.
Tucker, the two of us outdoing each other who will retire last. John Tucker, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. Ken Pruitt used to just stare at us, Paul Sweeney, like we were absolute idiots. The opening. We did it like Johnny Carson, you know.
Right.
That's great. Right now, nothing funny about what Kirk Hartman and his team at Wells Fargo have to write on this market, because Kirk Hartman, you know, you look across the Wells Fargo platform of your institutional and individual clients, your wealth services and all that. Is it a general statement to say so many people have missed this bull market off the March lows?
Well, I think it's fair to say that a lot of people missed it. But one thing was interesting was a lot of people stuck with their asset allocation. And I think they learned the lesson of 2008 and a lot of the other crises, that the best thing to do is to not sell the positions that you had. So
yeah.
I think a number of people did not jump in, but I think they did hold, which was good.
I think that's a great observation, and it leads to my key question. Kirk, you know, everybody that listens to this show knows where I am on rebalancing. I'm not a fan. Do you rebalance now out of your successful tech, or do you just hold them and apply new funds to other areas? Which is it?
Well, I think you have to move into other areas of growth. In other words, the mega tech, which are increasingly being viewed as almost defensive plays, are very long cash flows, and they're great to hold. But I think there are a lot of other growth opportunities. The other thing I think that a lot of people are looking at, and we've had huge growth, is just basic dividend yield in kind of the steady eddies, as I call them, the 2% dividend yields in good industrial stocks. What you want to do in something like this is you want to own those stocks through the crisis and, just power your way through this.
So, Kirk, we've had the Fed really, in a word, backstopping this market here, and that's all well and good here. Does the market need more fiscal stimulus? Because the economic data, remains very, very tenuous at best.
Well, I think we have to watch this. I think equities are up because of the incredible growth of the money supply. So the money supply is up something like 15 to 20%, depends how you measure it, and rates are really low. So I'm a little bit skeptical, other than, direct benefits to people that need it. But in terms of actually stimulating the economy, I think Chairman Powell indicated that the Fed was kind of out of bullets, so to speak. So I think we have to watch it. But if things do not improve in terms of unemployment, I think there will be another round.
Yeah, it's interesting here, Kirk. I mean, I think as Tom was suggesting, it seems, the lack of breadth in this market is just stunning to me. You think about those big tech names that you were just talking about. How concerned are you, just from a technical standpoint or a health of the market standpoint, that a lot of the performance that we've seen, both on the downside but certainly on the upside, has been really limited to a handful of stocks?
Well, two comments on that. One, if you look at the S&P 400 and the Russell 2000, the small caps and the mid caps, which in my mind are a much better measure of the broader economy, have caught up a lot. So they were down 35, 40%, the small caps, and now they're only down something like 12. So they have come back a lot. But to your point, you have to be concerned. But on the other hand, I think we're seeing a dramatic shift to the stay-at-home online economy. And so kind of makes sense that there's some specific mega-cap leaders.
Bloomberg Surveillance, we welcome all of you this morning here on Bloomberg Radio. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene on a Friday, nudging into a weekend where we'll all be thinking, we can do this with Mr. Hartman. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. You can do this with a graduate at Amherst College, as we worship Robert Frost.
Say Robert Frost, right.
Mr. Hartman, the giant of Amherst College, talked to us about the courage of taking a road. Where's the courage needed by investors now to be sure they go down the road less traveled?
Well, I think the road less traveled is the emerging markets, and I think a lot of that is the function of the dollar. So we have to pay attention to that. I think it's so interesting. If you think about, we lived in a global world and a global investing world a year ago, and now it's very much a regional world. So I think that there are opportunities outside the U.S., and I think that that's the road less traveled. And one final comment, I think you want to look to the emerging markets and the emerging economies of Asia, Korea, Taiwan, that increasingly China got the message that they can't rely on U.S. Chips and U.S. technology, and that's the opportunity.
Well, you've got the advantage here of Jay Bryson and your team at Wells Fargo on that. That's all good and well. 3 months ago or so, we had that nice international dash, and then we've run into a pandemic as well. Are you suggesting we revert back to that international rotation we saw, say, a year ago?
Well, we've all been waiting for that. So I'm a little skeptical now of Europe. I think we have to be careful about Europe. I think that they are still dealing with a lot of issues, including the pandemic. It seems like China is surging, and a lot of that, I think, is driven by the central government. But the China market's done very, very well. And, again, I like the technology companies in Asia, I think, and, in Japan, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Kirk, how concerned are you about the buildup in debt levels, not just at the company level, but I'm thinking about more like the central bank levels as that more and more liquidity is pumped in to the economy here. How concerned are you about that kind of longer term?
Well, I think there is a looming debt issue out there. We all know that. You think about it, there are three ways to deal with debt. You can grow your way out, you can inflate your way out, or you can repudiate the debt. Obviously, central governments and countries like us are going to be very careful. Obviously, would never repudiate the debt. So I think what's going to happen is the Fed is going to try to keep rates low. I'm a little skeptical, given all the debt that's out there, that can last too long. So I think the big question among institutional investors is what's the future of fixed income? Because, if you look out at the horizon, you get any kind of inflation or any kind of rise in rates, fixed income returns are challenged.
So in that regard, how are you positioning yourself on the fixed income side of the equation here in terms of perhaps duration? Are you taking less risk, pulling it in a little bit?
Well, I think you want to shorten duration and go to floating rates. So I think a lot of people are dusting off the playbooks and looking at things like interest rate swaps, Eurodollar future hedging. I grew up, this is my sixth financial crisis. I grew up in the 80s with rates at 20%. And, it's interesting. A lot of people today that have run money have never dealt with rising rates.
Okay, here's the key question. This is academic, folks. This is CFA level 5. How many once-in-a-lifetime crises have we had, Kirk?
A lot. It's funny. I was thinking the other day, it seemed like every 4 or 5 years, and they're all different. But it just seems like the nature of capitalism.
Remember 14% treasuries?
I remember 20% on some rates.
Yeah.
I remember people were taking out mortgage loans at 18%.
I bought 2-year Chrysler paper once, Chrysler Financial 12% paper. I made a boatload on that trade, actually. And full disclosure, folks, there were a few that didn't work out quite as well. I look, Kirk, at where we are, and that brings up the key assumption for Wells Fargo clients and for everybody listening here, and that is just simply the actuarial assumption forward. We've really got to adjust, and we need to adjust by what, 200 basis points in?
Well, I think we all have to expect that rates will go up. And to your point, there certainly is financial repression going on, and savers and retirees are being taxed. So I think you can't assume, I think you have to assume rates are going to be higher at some point. And also, I think 7% actuarial returns that a lot of pension plans are budgeting is way too high. I think it's probably got to be more like 5%.
This has been wonderful. Kirk Hartman, we'll see you the next once-in-a-lifetime crisis. Chief Investment Officer with Wells Fargo. Just really brilliant there. Folks, that's a great Friday summary to get into thinking the weekend about where you are in your investments. With our news in New York City is Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. Another record-setting day amid a resurgence of COVID-19 cases has forced states to revisit contingency plans to safely reopen U.S. schools. White House Coronavirus Task Force member Dr. Anthony Fauci is recommending each locale considers slowing down the opening of businesses, though not necessarily shutting down their economies.
I would hope we don't have to resort to shutdown. I think that would be something that is obviously an extreme. I think it would not be viewed very, very favorably, even by the states and the cities involved. So rather than think in terms of reverting back down to a complete shutdown, I would think we need to get the states pausing in their opening process.
President Trump is set to visit South Florida for a briefing on drug trafficking. But with Florida's COVID-19 infection rate continuing to skyrocket, others want the president to clarify his push for schools to reopen in the fall or risk losing funding. It's not a strong tropical storm, but Faye is expected to bring heavy rain and gusty winds up the eastern seaboard, including southern New England. The tropical storm formed Thursday afternoon. The powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says she does not expect her brother to meet President Trump this year. Kim Yo-jong says there's no reason for the North to gift Trump a high-level profile meeting when it's not being substantially rewarded in return. In California, teams of cadaver dogs and rescue divers are combing Lake Piru looking for 33-year-old Glee star Naya Rivera, who went missing on the lake while out boating with her 4-year-old son. The little boy was found alive alone in the pontoon. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Green on the screen. NASDAQ red. This is a flip for what we've seen in the last 2-3 weeks, but nevertheless, difficult tape earlier, and we do better now with the market. The Dow up 81 points, SPX up 2. It's fractional moves, but we'll take it as we can. The President of the United States speaking with the press right now. We'll give you those headlines as we can. Paul, I look at what we saw with Amazon today from Jason Bazinet.
Yep.
It's Citigroup, just stunning what we're seeing in these techs.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And I think, as we heard from several of our guests today, there's a real rush to some of these handful of names that are really driving the market, because I think investors can simply see a proven top-line revenue story, and in this world, that's important.
We're going to run out of time here, but we got to touch on that with Paul Sweeney here as we go further into July as well. Again, surprising green on the screen. Dow up 106 points. The VIX 29. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Blame Athleisure and Zoom. America's oldest clothier, Brooks Brothers, has filed for bankruptcy. With formal attire losing favor in our current work-from-home reality, the 2-century-old apparel company is the latest old-line retailer to succumb, joining the likes of Neiman Marcus and J. Crew in bankruptcy filings since the virus took hold. In other fashion news, if Kylie Jenner can eradicate more than $1 billion from Snap Inc.'s market value in a single tweet, then surely the mega celebrity's promotion of a black-owned fashion label can have the opposite effect. Such was the experience of Jedediah Duyil, a London-born designer of Nigerian and Ghanaian descent, who saw her collection at Loud Brand Studios sell out after 2 Instagram posts from Jenner racked up more than 13 million likes. According to a Bloomberg News survey, 61% of Americans say they never buy based on influencers. But with a social media star as big as Jenner among Generation Z and millennials, odds can change. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Global news.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Friday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
It's 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. We have mixed markets right now in the early going. The Dow Jones Industrial Average right now is up 118 points, a rise of about 0.5%. We're at 25,826. The S&P 500 up only 4 points, 3155. The tech-heavy NASDAQ Composite Index, for a change, tech's lower right now. It is down 49 points, down about 0.5%. The NASDAQ at 10,500. The NASDAQ slumping again, while the S&P 500 kind of swings between small gains and losses. We have data showing record deaths in Florida, Texas, and California from the virus. That seems to be weighing on some of the stocks. Gilead Sciences, that's gaining. The company said its remdesivir treatment cut COVID-19 mortality risk by 62%. Tech shares did lift the stock's Europe 600 index earlier after TSMC posted revenue just above estimates for the most recent quarter. That's a chip maker for Apple. Once again, the Dow up 104 points, the NASDAQ Composite Index down 42 points. And we check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trade today right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
John Tucker, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Well, the good folks of Singapore today are heading to the polls as the ruling party seeks to extend its 55-year rule with a fresh mandate to counter the city-state's worst ever recession amid the coronavirus pandemic. To get the latest, we welcome Bloomberg's Juliet Sally live in Singapore. So, Juliet, give us a sense of what's at stake here for Singapore with this election.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So the ruling party, the People's Action Party, has ruled Singapore for 55 years since independence, but they're really looking for a fresh mandate here. And I guess what we're looking for is to see how much of a majority they hold on to. Their worst result they've ever had was in 2011 when they only, and I put only in inverted commas, won 60% of the popular vote. So they're looking to maintain that two-thirds majority. They've never lost more than 93% of the seats on offer. There are 93 seats on offer in this election, and they're hoping, I guess, to get around 70% of the popular vote. Anything less than that could potentially lead to a bit of soul searching. But this election being happening, I should say, during a global pandemic, there has been some criticism, I guess, of how Singapore initially handled the coronavirus cases, because, of course, we had that big spike coming through in the migrant worker dorms. And then the voters are worried as well about the future, their own future jobs. We've got unemployment rising quite sharply in the first quarter. Then, of course, concerns about how much stimulus is going to be pumped through into the economy, although it's worth noting that the government has spent about $67 billion in its special budget and dipped into ample reserves to keep the economy on track. But certainly the thing we're looking for here is to see just how much of a mandate the PAP holds onto in this election. And worth noting that they've actually pushed the polls out by another 2 hours, so we won't get results probably until about 11 a.m. Wall Street time.
That's interesting. Is that just because the turnout is so large?
Yeah, it's a large turnout. We don't have exact figures,
Sure,
although there is some speculation. It could be something like, 96% of registered voters, which is very huge. But also remember that you've got this happening in a social distancing environment as well. So people were given specific times that they could go to the polls. They've got to wear gloves. They've got to bring their own pen, and that's pushed out the timing as well. But one of the opposition parties actually issued a statement when the polling was extended by 2 hours till 10 p.m. our time. So so 10 a.m. your time, saying, look, this is highly irregular and to their knowledge it's never been done before, and that some of the polling agents may have had to have left by 8 p.m. So they're saying that could leave the results questionable because polling stations would have been unattended.
I am fascinated. I want to stay away from the controversies and all the different issues about censorship in Singapore and the sensitivities. Here is a giant of a man who invented a tiger economy. His son is 68 years old. He was first in his class in mathematics at Cambridge. Now is the prime minister. Are there lees to come? Is there a follow-on to what has been through our lifetimes? One family and one nation?
Well, it's interesting because this has been a really contentious issue because Prime Minister Lee actually has a brother who then joined the opposition party, or one of the opposition parties, a week ago, which was being seen as, you know, really lifting this family feud with the brothers had been kind of feuding over the estate of Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of Singapore. But in terms of who's going to be Prime Minister Lee's succession, it's probably more likely not to be a Lee, but instead the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Heng Swee Kat. And he's been one of the people that's been, you know, really at the forefront of the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. He's, you know, essentially expected to take over from Lee when Lee signals his intention to retire, I should say, which he says will be when he's 70 in 2022.
Juliet, besides me and Paul visiting Singapore in February, which is on our agenda, I'm curious of the Chinese presence in modern Singapore. China, obviously, in the news, et cetera, with Hong Kong and all that. Tell us about quickly tell us about the Chinese community in Singapore.
Well, the Chinese community is huge, but Singapore is a very multicultural society that is kind of, I mean, that's how the independence happened between the Malays, between India and China in itself. But certainly it is quite large in terms of, for your global audience, though, you know, English is the main spoken language here. And I think in terms of looking at Singapore as the way you look at, say, what's happening in Hong Kong, it's still a very, very different scenario. Singapore very much still trying to be a very strong independent country, which it has been since 1965.
This is great, Paul. I can see you, me, and Julie at Fullerton Bar.
Sure.
In Singapore.
I would love that.
In February.
Marina Bay Sands up the top, Tom. C'est la vie, where Kim Jong-un went, actually.
It just completely works out. Juliet, Sally, thank you so much for a brief on a fascinating and serious election as well. Paul, let us get back to the markets here and just, you know, gather up the pieces. I think everybody's going to look at their 201ks. In my case, it's a 101k because I've missed the March rally. But you know, everybody's sort of recalibrating in the middle of this pandemic over what to do. I've never seen it like this.
Yeah, Tom, and I think you know, we kind of thought there would be a second wave here, but I mean, I'm not sure how people are really viewing what's happening in some of these key states like California, Texas, and Florida. It doesn't feel like a second wave. It just feels like
I don't think it's
you know, they just missed the opportunity to keep this thing at bay here, and so the question is, how long is this going to be? How long are we all going to have to deal with it? And it just feels like longer is kind of the answer before we get treatments, before we get a vaccine, and it's just going to be something that's obviously a new part of our normal life these days.
We will see. We'll drive forward the conversation through the day, yes, on the markets, and also, of course, the president. I know speaking to the press, Michael Barr and others will have good comments on that. It is a flat market on a Friday. The Dow up 9, SPX goes the other way, -6. NASDAQ finally negative by 0.7%. The story for me and John Farrow today and Paul Sweeney, without question, the yield space. 10-year yield 0.59%, 2-year yield new lows 0.1389. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Asset managers who sees change.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now, the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power power of dreams.
As shops open up again, how do we all stay safe? Fontaine runs a craft store.
We've made the shop COVID safe. If you can't keep 2 meters apart, make sure it's 1 meter with extra precautions. Know the number of customers allowed in at any one time. Use the hand sanitizer at the entrance and use contactless payments. I'm loving serving customers again, but please, to keep us open, we've all got to keep to the guidelines.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Stay close to college hoops conversation with the College Basketball Talk podcast from NBC Sports. Join Rob Doster and Bobby Reagan for weekly recaps of what's happening in every conference, nostalgic flashbacks to classic games, and big picture discussions on the future of the sport.
Yes, they found a way to ensure that there was a financial incentive for be able to get paid for a kid to go there, if that makes sense. But it's not, there was still a recruitment involved, right? Let me think about it like this.
Search College Basketball Talk on TuneIn to listen.
Trey Wingo here from ESPN's Golic and Wingo. Every morning, Mike Golic Jr. and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golic and Wingo to start listening today.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Neil. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1999, during the FIFA Women's World Cup final, the U.S. beats China 5-4 on penalties, earning the U.S. women's team their second World Cup title.
Party begins in Pasadena. What a day this was, and it continues from the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. The United States has won the Women's World Cup.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Will technology lead us out of this crisis?
We don't know how many companies can accept people back on their roster.
The Fed seems to have really flexed its muscles.
There's still a coronavirus risk.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
To wring out that buy-the-dip mentality, that takes time.
Are we looking at a more damaging break in the labor market? Does the shape of the yield curve matter?
We're looking at late 2021, early 2022, where it really feels quote-unquote normal.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, it is Friday and we will wrap up the weekend markets and lots more in the next 2 hours. We're going to be speaking with Cheryl Palmer, Chairman and CEO of Taylor Morrison, Scottsdale, Arizona, not only on the situation there in Arizona with COVID-19, but also the dramatic increase in sales for the fifth largest home builder. We'll also be looking at these markets with David Katz of Matrix Asset Advisors. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash now from Greg Jarrett.
Bonnie, stocks have been trading mixed to down amid concern that a rising number of coronavirus cases will curb the global economic recovery. Treasuries are up, along with the 5-year yield touching a record low. Now we check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. The S&P is now down 0.4%, down 12. Dow's down 0.2%, down 47. While the NASDAQ is down 0.8%, down 80. The 10-year is up 7/32. The yield, 0.59%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.5% at $39.81 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.2% at $18.0680 an ounce. The dollar yen, 106.72. The euro, $1.13.05. And the British pound, $1.26.32. Sources are telling us that American Airlines has threatened to cancel some of its orders for Boeing's troubled 737 MAX jets, a sign of deepening financial stress in the aviation industry. The Fort Worth, Texas-based carrier has struggled to secure financing for the 17 jets that it expected Boeing to deliver this year. BA's up 0.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is on. Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Market Drivers is brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting witham.com. Kind of have the markets kind of trading a little bit down today. They're kind of been up and down, not really much movement. But let's get a sense of what's going on under the hood. We can do that with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at?
Well, it is a bit of a mixed bag in a sense, not only in terms of market direction early on, but in terms of, industry groups within the S&P 500. You look at the 11 main ones, technology stocks doing the worst on the day, and a lot of that is what we're seeing in some of the chip makers. Companies like Skyworks Solutions off 1.7%, Applied Materials and chip equipment production down 1.6%. And then on the other side, you've got financial and energy stocks as the best performers among those 11 main groups. And you talk about two areas of the market that have been beaten up over time. They certainly qualify. And, with the financials, you have to remember that we're going to be hearing from the biggest banks next week as second quarter earnings reports get underway. That's really going to be a focus for the week, no doubt. I mean, you consider what kind of a lineup we've got, starting Tuesday, actually. Yep. J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo all that day. And Goldman Sachs on Wednesday, and Bank of America on Thursday. It's really going to be a loaded week when it comes to the financial companies. That's how earnings seasons start, and it's going to be like that yet again.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Sorry, go ahead, Paul, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Vonnie, it's just interesting. I think what everybody will be focused on is some of the reserves that these banks feel like they need to take. That'll give you a good sense of kind of how they're viewing the economic risk.
Right. I mean, to what extent are they facing loan losses because, their customers have been hurt by the coronavirus? I mean, that's going to be a front and center kind of issue. And whether we're talking about businesses that had to shut down or consumers that lost their jobs and couldn't keep up the payments necessarily on their credit cards, I mean, there's going to be a lot to take in terms of how the virus is shaking out for the biggest financial companies. And that's on top of the effect of, what's happening with interest rates. The idea that perhaps they can't make as much money as they have in the past just off that net interest margin, the gap between what they're paying on their loans and deposits and what they stand to earn on their investments.
Morgan Stanley with a note this morning, 34 banks with greater than 50% of their total deposits located in the 50 counties that have seen the greatest number of new COVID cases. So there's a lot of concern out there among banking analysts. Dave, what about the growth stocks? A lot of conversation as well today about how we've seen such a run up, but in comparison with the 2000 bubble, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, it all depends on how you want to look at it. I mean, in terms of valuation, we could argue we're pretty much where we were in 2000 with the technology companies or with the NASDAQ 100 index, which has gotten a lot of focus lately. You can say the same when it comes to the relationship between growth and value stocks more generally. At the same time, I mean, my chart of the day today points out that if you look at the NASDAQ 100 over the past 5 years, the gain that we've seen there is nothing like what we saw in the 5 years leading up to that index's peak in March 2000. And it's a point that Michael Batnick made. He's the research director over at Ritholtz Wealth Management, Barry Ritholtz's firm. Of course, you know him from his columns for Bloomberg Opinion and his Masters in Business program here on Bloomberg Radio. So, it's all a matter of how you kind of see things shaking out, I suppose. I mean, given the run-up that we have had in the stocks lately, which is kind of accelerated from what we've seen over time, now the question is, can these companies really kind of come through with the numbers that would justify the faith that investors are showing in them by, bidding up their shares, you might say.
Yeah, one of the names I was looking at this morning, Dave, was Gilead Sciences. Their remdesivir drug got some positive news today, and that stock's up 1.4%, showing you that there are going to be winners and losers here as investors try to place their bets on treatments and vaccines. And I think the healthcare space is going to remain very much in focus for a lot of investors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you consider that the study data out of Gilead talking about a 62% reduction in the risk of dying from COVID-19. I mean, that's a number that gets your attention, no question. That said, the U.S. government is already committed to buying remdesivir. It looks like Europe is trying to follow suit. So, I mean, a lot of that is out there. So the bigger question becomes, what happens with the vaccines, with other potential treatments for the drug or for the virus. I mean, there's a lot to get through.
I've been reading Brian Jabata's column today with great interest about how defined pension funds have way more impact on this market than some of the actors that you might think about. I guess particularly in the liability-driven parts of the market, the fixed income parts, but also in equities. Any sign that they might get active?
It's always a hard one to kind of get your head around in terms of what they're doing to move money. I mean, that said, one thing is for sure. So the assumptions that these funds are making when it comes to their returns over time, you have to argue are too optimistic in a lot of cases, given the fact that bond yields are so low. And they have to be able to respond somehow. And if you bring down the assumed rates of return, that means that, whoever's running the pension fund has to kick in more money. That's not what you want to see. The alternative is, maybe to shift investments around. And to the extent that stocks have done well in coming off their lows in March, I mean, it renews the case perhaps for being more invested in shares and maybe backing away from bonds a bit just because they don't generate the kind of yield that they have over time.
Tom Keene and John Tucker were talking about this same topic just this morning, and I think their conclusion was that they both have to work a lot longer than maybe they'd initially planned, given the actuarial assumptions there. You can't bank on that 7% return anymore. Maybe these pension funds need to think about something in the 5% range is kind of what we've been hearing, so we'll have to pay attention there. Certainly a big issue for savers going forward. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thanks so much. And Vonnie, it's interesting here as we think about the markets. The fixed income returns are just so much lower than they were historically. And again, as you think about actuarial returns for pensions and for working folks, just in general, they got to think about perhaps a longer-term profile. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines, and we'll do that with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have?
Well, Paul, in about an hour, Vice President Mike Pence is going to lead another meeting of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. That's as President Trump heads to South Florida today. He's going to be at an anti-drug trafficking event and at his first in-person fundraiser in about a month. Last night, the president was on Fox's Hannity program. He said the country's rising infection count comes down to testing.
We do testing like nobody's ever done testing. And when we test, the more you test, the more cases you find. Other countries, when they test, and I ask them all, they test when somebody's not feeling well or when somebody walks into a hospital. So they don't have tests. They have tests that are very, very limited.
COVID deaths are also on the rise in several hotspot states, including Florida. Miami-Dade school superintendent Antonio Carvalho says it's way too soon to think about reopening schools.
The return to physical schooling under the current health threat, and quite frankly, considering the White House's own reopening plan, which declares that during phase one, physical schooling cannot take place.
Meantime, New York just reported another 0.2% increase in COVID-19 cases. That is in line with the 7-day average. The administration's top general is breaking with the president on the issue of military bases with Confederate names.
The Confederacy, the American Civil War, was fought, and it was an act of rebellion. It was an act of treason at the time against the Union, against the Stars and Stripes, against the U.S. Constitution. And those officers turned their back on their oath.
Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley testified before the House Armed Services Committee. Global news on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Gathering world-renowned world-renowned experts takes effort.
We have the perfect person.
Asking them the right questions takes Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
Is this possibly early indications of a second wave?
Bloomberg Business Week.
Silicon Valley will be forever changed by this pandemic. What's your take?
Are they paying off their balances?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern.
That is a significant shift.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
The best of Bloomberg Business Week every business day.
We've got a market sell-off that's spreading around the globe.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, Carol.
The day's breaking global business, finance, and tech news, along with smart analysis.
We know the Fed is going to be sure and steady.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast.
A great scoop on the terminal.
Listen today on BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
when family video calls are too good to miss. Your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch. And one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Values SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
Are you ready to play?
This summer, ITV Hub is fully loaded with loads more full series.
Gonna get messy.
Yeah, like it's fuller than ever. From Love Island to Liar, we have divas lined up back to back.
Filmy and Sister.
From the GC and the Ibiza Weekender reps to the Real Housewives, it's round full of lots and lots of...
This is getting too much now.
Laughs, tears and smiles. It's crammed full with full series like Quiz, Flesh and Blood, Harry's Heroes and Manx in Mumbai. We've grown, expanded and just gone a bit extra this summer.
Give me some more.
ITV Hub fully loaded this summer.
The best experience possible.
Did we mention it's looking fuller than ever?
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The NASDAQ is slumping while the S&P fluctuates, all as data indicate that record deaths in Florida, Texas, and California from the virus continue. Gilead Sciences gained after the company said its remdesivir treatment cut COVID-19 mortality risk by 62%. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is little changed now, just up under 1 point. Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 0.3%, up 77, and the NASDAQ is down 0.4%, down 37. The 10-year is up 5/32. The yield is 0.59%. West Texas Intermediate's up 0.6% at 39.86 a barrel, while COMEX Gold is up 0.3% at 18.1030 per ounce. The dollar yen, 106.72. The euro, $1.13.15, and the British pound, $1.26.47. Prices paid to U.S. producers unexpectedly fell for the month of June, signaling limited inflationary pressure after a coronavirus-induced slump in demand. The producer price index decreased 0.2% from the month earlier after a 0.4% gain in May. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, it's clear that the pandemic has changed consumer behaviors. It's changed how businesses conduct their business. That's very much the case in the residential real estate market. So to get some more color on that, we welcome Cheryl Palmer, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Taylor Morrison. Taylor Morrison is the fifth largest home builder and developer in the United States. Joins us on the phone from Scottsdale. Cheryl, thanks so much for joining us here. I know your company has been moving more towards virtual sales of residential real estate. So this pandemic, I'm guessing, has accelerated that process. Talk to us about kind of how your business is changing.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Of course, I call it the silver lining of COVID, that, our industry has really had to make some adjustments on how we communicate. We've always been known for being a little kind of archaic in the way we build houses, but I think the first step was really how we market and interact with consumers the way they want to be interacted with. So you're absolutely right. When the pandemic started and everybody went home and we had to, generally lock our sales office doors and put safety protocols in, we had to, communicate with our buyers differently. And we had introduced a new website late last year that had an infrastructure with the intentions of really creating a virtual environment. And so what we've seen is the consumer really just loved this virtual environment. In fact, we introduced, I think it was early April, we introduced this online appointment system, and our customers could schedule an appointment to either come in and meet with someone privately and get a private tour, or they could schedule an appointment to be walked through a virtual 3D tour of our homes, or maybe just to talk. We found about 80% of the customers still wanted to come in for that private tour, but many did not. And since then, we've introduced self-guided tours so they could, walk into one of our inventory homes. We've introduced an online reservation system where they can just hold a house and then, go directly to contract. It's been tremendous. We've had probably in the last 8-10 weeks something like 250 sales without a customer ever walking in the sales office.
And your month of June was your best month ever. You sold 1,715 homes, so congratulations on that. I'm looking at your website, and there really is a huge variety, starting in the 230s range and going right up to, even past, $500,000 in some areas of Arizona. What about prices, though? In general, have they been dropping during the pandemic?
I would tell you that if you were to go back to late March, early April, everybody was seeking to understand what was going to happen with the consumers, kind of mindset, what was going to happen with jobs. And I would tell you there was a freeze on prices. I don't think, because the inventory has always been so tight coming into the pandemic, and even tighter today, I don't think you saw this tremendous drop in prices at all. I mean, you had situations, you could have had a closeout, things that have been very typical to the industry. But in total, I'd say no, prices have held. And if anything, over the last many weeks, I would tell you that there's been very thoughtful price increases going on across the industry. But once again, you have to remember that we are sitting at very, very low inventories in both the resale and the new home market. And I think as you look at kind of the way the consumer's thinking about their relationship with the home, we've really started to see a bias to new. We've seen that, there's a lot of reasons why people are moving today, right? It could be because they need more rooms, they need more office space, really around wellness features. And so it has kept prices pretty healthy.
Cheryl, are you seeing, the phenomena we've seen or heard about or read about since the pandemic as a kind of a de-urbanization move, and, as people try to get to a less dense living environment? Do you think that it's a longer-term trend or maybe just a short-term effect from the pandemic?
It's such an important question, and it's a question that's gotten a lot of kind of, I'd say, chatter over the last, 10, 12 weeks. Interestingly enough, I would tell you at the beginning, it was just that. It was a lot of talk. We do a lot of research and talking to our buyers, our shoppers that are walking in the door, the folks that are coming on through our website. And we've been doing that every week since this started. And for the first time, I would tell you that we are seeing in our buyer data this, I don't want to call it a flight to rural or suburban, but we're absolutely seeing those numbers rise. And I think what you're really seeing is that people are thinking about being able to work home and not having to do those commutes, being able to buy and, look at the difference in what happens to prices as you move out into kind of the suburban markets. We are seeing a lot more interest and a lot of interest as people are in that shopping mode as well. It's not just for single family. I think that that's probably going to be the beneficiary, but we're seeing a lot of interest around townhomes as well. But yeah, not kind of in the center core.
Cheryl, we have to leave it there, but a pleasure to speak with you. Cheryl Palmer is Chairman and CEO of Taylor Morrison, based in Scottsdale, Arizona, but with a presence in many, many states, primarily Arizona and California, Colorado, Florida, but also in sort of the more north states like Oregon, and then some of the southeastern states as well. We have Washington in there, and some really beautiful homes on this website, Paul. You could get sucked in very easily.
I got plenty of real estate right now, thank you.
The fifth largest home builder in the United States. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The S&P edging slightly lower this Friday. Optimists are betting that fiscal and monetary support will contain the fallout. Others point out that the labor market is still treacherous. United Airlines and its pilots union have reached a tentative agreement on a voluntary leave program. There's also an early retirement plan for senior pilots who are 62 and older. Earlier this week, United notified about 36,000 employees that they could lose their jobs in October. That included more than 2,200 pilots. Harley-Davidson will eliminate 700 positions, about 12% of its global workforce. The motorcycle maker is focusing more on its core markets and model segments. And Verizon is extending its low-income internet offer through the rest of the year. The program offers 200 megabit Fios service with no data caps to customers eligible for its Lifeline discount program for as little as $20 a month. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The market's in focus every business day. The Bloomberg Markets Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
What's the thought on Apple here?
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn. Subscribe today at BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or iTunes.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Friday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now, the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
Should your kids go back to school? Ask Andrea. She's a teacher.
We're doing everything we can to keep the children safe and happy at school, which is why it's great that more of those who can are coming back. Not only for their education, but for their overall well-being too. It gives them a routine, helps develop their social skills, and they get to see their friends too.
If your child is eligible, they should return to school. The government is working towards getting all pupils back in September. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
From all of us at Thames Water, thank you for supporting our key workers. As the weather warms up, demand for our water is growing, so we need your help more than ever. From taking shorter showers to turning off your sprinklers, you can make every drop count, inside and outside your home, to keep taps flowing in your community. Just don't forget to keep washing your hands regularly in line with government advice. Be an H2O hero. Find out how at thameswater.co.uk/watersmart.
Minions, did you know Sky Broadband Superfast guarantees your speed? No, Stuart, it doesn't guarantee you'll win the game. Or that your video will go viral. Or that you'll match with the love of your life. But Sky Broadband Superfast does guarantee the speed we promised or money back. So reliable, it's minion-proof. Sky, believe in better. Sky Fibre areas only. Speed measured to hub. Must drop below min download speed for 3 consecutive days. 1 month subscription refund. Claim up to twice in min-term after first fortnight. See sky.com.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to chat with David Katz, CIO of Matrix Advisors, to get his thoughts on the markets. Is it just driven by liquidity? Plus, John Alters, senior markets editor for Bloomberg, to discuss his column. It's America's first for markets, but maybe not for long. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, stocks have been trading mixed as investors consider whether the rising number of coronavirus cases will curb the global economic recovery. Treasuries are up, and the 5-year yield has touched a record low. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is now up 0.1%, up 4. The Dow is up 0.4%, up 99. The Nasdaq's down 0.1%, down 15. The 10-year is up 3/32 with a yield of 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.75% at $39.92 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% at $18.1050 an ounce. The dollar yen stands at 106.71. The euro is $1.13.18. The British pound $1.26.50. Rivian Automotive, the electric truck startup already backed by Amazon.com and Ford Motor Company, has raised $2.5 billion in new funding from a group of investors led by T. Rowe Price & Associates. Other investors in the funding round include Soros Fund Management, Coatue, Fidelity Management and Research, and Barron Capital. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Vonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
So as Dave Wilson was telling us earlier, Michael Batnick at Ritholtz Wealth Management talks about comparisons between U.S. tech stocks gains and the bubble 20 years ago. I particularly want to bring this up with our next guest now. He's David Katz, Chief Investment Officer at Matrix Asset Advisors with more than $800 million in assets under management. David, it is great to speak with you. I know that one of your sort of areas of expertise is the tech sector. You've obviously, been following that area and the melt up for many years, decades even, and you did like some of those stocks. What do you make of the idea that we might have a lot further to go if you look at comparisons between how the Nasdaq 100 soared in the 5 years leading up to the March 2000 peak and how it's been quote unquote soaring up to now?
Yeah, we would not look at that and say, oh, good, you have 5 years and take comfort in the current melt-up, because it ended hideously, and it took 10 years for the Nasdaq to get back to break even. So we think the market's going to be higher over the next 9 to 12 months, but we're getting increasingly wary about the tech melt-up right now, and we would not be using the higher stock prices every day as a signal to jump aboard. We think best case, a lot of the returns have already been made in that area. We think that they're a lot more risky in terms of the downside. And we do think there are lots of areas of the market that have been left behind entirely by the recovery and are selling at pretty attractive valuations. So you've got parts of the market at 30 and 40 times earnings, and then a lot of stock at 10 and 15 times earnings that are paying 3 and 4% yields. So we think investors should really focus on the better businesses, but at lower valuations. You went through the bond numbers before. Interest rates are at 0. Bonds are paying less than 0.5%. At some point, getting 3 or 4% dividends is going to be a really good thing.
All right, so David, what are some of those sectors that you think have been left behind that might offer some attractive risk return?
So in terms of sectors, we have not liked utilities for a very long time. They've been an outlier bad performer this year, so we've really warmed up to them, and we've been buying in that group. We think you can buy select healthcare companies like a CVS or a Merck, pretty attractive. Select consumer staples. We think the telecom companies like Verizon and AT&T are very attractive. Also, some media companies like a Comcast or a Viacom. So there are lots of really good businesses out there if you have a 6 or 12-month time horizon. And all the businesses that I mentioned are going to be able to get through the COVID recession in very good form, have very good balance sheets, and are survivors.
You say that, David. Let me come at you with something a little devil's advocate-y, if you like. So those telecoms, for example, we all know that there are problems right now in making content and in sort of fighting with all of these other streaming services to gain eyeballs. If COVID hasn't sort of made that go faster, then I don't know what will. What are you seeing across media and across telecom that makes you believe that, yeah, the particular companies you mentioned are in a better spot?
Well, in terms of Comcast, you know, while they have NBC, they also provide the pipes into the house. So that business is doing very, very well. So they're very well diversified. They're global. And as more people need the Internet, and as more people are sitting at home looking for something to watch on, whether it's a TV or a computer or your iPad, they're a net beneficiary. So they've gone through this in very good form, have consistently raised the dividend. We really like management there. Viacom is a little bit different insofar as they are a content producer, and they've got a massive library in Paramount. You know, if you look at Netflix at 60 or 70 or 100 times earnings and at a 225 billion market cap, and then you look at Viacom with this massive content at a $13 billion market cap, at some point something's going to be better for them. They are doing quite well in terms of their earnings and running the business. CBS is a very strong franchise, and you know, people are looking at content, whether it's over the top, whether it's, you know, linear or watching on television. They are looking for content, and at 6.5 times earnings, you're not paying a lot for that.
So, David, let's just switch gears real quickly to another sector that's really been out of favor, and that is kind of some of that energy patch. I'm looking at WTI crude here, just about $40 a barrel. Anything there that gets your attention?
So we have owned energy and have been beaten up pretty badly. We think from here, if you have a 6 to 12-month time horizon, that there's a pretty good likelihood that when the economy recovers, oil prices will recover and those energy stocks will come back. We try to stick to the highest quality energy companies. So CVX is absolutely committed to a very, very healthy yield. We think that stock could be 20% higher. Schlumberger, which is, you know, the top quality driller out there, is going to have a pretty slow business, but they have revamped themselves. They are going to be positive cash flow. They definitely will be a survivor. And the stock's at 17.5. We think it ultimately goes to 30 or 40. So it's a very out of favor group. But we think you're going to make money if you can hold your nose with it. There are other places that you can get in the market without that type of risk. But we do think if you are looking at energy and don't mind the risk, you'll do okay there as well.
David Katz, thanks so much for joining us. David Katz, he is Chief Investment Officer at Matrix Asset Advisors, about $800 million in assets under management, getting his thoughts on the market. Maybe, you know, time to pull back just a little bit from some of those high-flying tech names, as per David, and maybe thinking about some other sectors, whether it's tech, telecom, media, maybe a little bit on the edge on energy here, maybe looking for some value in the marketplace, because you take a look at these big 6, 7, 8 names that have really powered the S&P 500 forward here. For a lot of folks, they feel a little rich, a little overbought, and maybe a time to look at some other sectors. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines. We'll do that with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Paul, Vice President Mike Pence is getting ready to lead another meeting of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. That's as President Trump heads to South Florida, where he'll attend a counter-narcotics briefing and his first in-person campaign fundraiser in about a month. After another record day of COVID-19 infections in this country, Dr. Anthony Fauci says it makes sense for hotspots to slow reopening.
I would hope we don't have to resort to shutdown. I think that would be something that is obviously an extreme. I think it would not be viewed very, very favorably, even by the states and the cities involved.
Florida is among the worst hotspots in this country. And as Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is now casting some doubt on whether the Republican Party should hold its convention in Jacksonville next month.
McConnell called his party's plans for a 2020 convention, quote, a challenging situation, suggesting it might not happen. At least 6 Republican senators have already said they're not planning to attend. President Trump recently relocated the bulk of the convention to Jacksonville, Florida, which last week had the fastest growing rate of coronavirus cases of any metropolitan area in the U.S. The event was originally planned for Charlotte, but North Carolina's governor balked at holding a full capacity gathering because of the outbreak. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The Trump administration plans to make an announcement next week related to escalating tensions in the South China Sea. The U.S. has already raised concerns about China's decision to hold military drills in contested waters around the Paracel Islands. The Defense Department called the actions unlawful last week. Sources tell Bloomberg the U.S. will lay out its official position next week. Global news on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
How long? How much? How...
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Friday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass? A self-balancing motorcycle? And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda, the power of dreams.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace.
Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
First, we're told that masks don't work. Then, we're told to wear them all the time. One week, we hear that the mortality rate is 2%. The next, well, who knows? In the time of COVID-19, there is so much uncertainty, and so much scientists are learning in real time, along with the rest of the world. So it's hard to know what you can be sure of and what's still a big question mark. Enter Podcast 19 from 538, where we'll explore the evidence behind the science in our fight against coronavirus. I'm science journalist Anna Rothschild. Each week, I'll investigate coronavirus mysteries, keep track of the latest developments on vaccines and treatments. Oh, and I'll try to edit out all the times I shush my family since I'm recording this thing from the chaos of my home.
Search Podcast 19 to listen today. Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Stocks have been mostly mixed in trading today after Gilead Sciences said its antiviral drug candidate remdesivir slashed the risk of death in patients with severe cases of COVID-19. This is the U.S. reported another daily record of new cases of the disease. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is now up 0.25% up 7. The Dow's up 0.6% up 169. And the NASDAQ is down 0.1%, down 14. The 10-year is up 3/30 seconds, the yield 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 1.1% at $40.05 per barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% at $18.0960 an ounce. The dollar yen, 106.70. The euro is $1.1320, and the British pound $1.26.54. Widespread mask wearing and following other healthcare measures could be vital to economic growth in the U.S., according to Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas President Robert Kaplan. Kaplan says mask wearing could substantially mute the spread of the virus, which is resurging in parts of the country and leading to a renewed halt in economic activity, and says using face coverings could bolster reopenings and create faster growth. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 10:48 on Wall Street. Time for Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined right now by John Authers. He has a fascinating column out now. All signs point to a sea change in an investment regime long dominated by the U.S. John, thanks so much for joining us here. What's your key takeaway here? Why do you think there may be a sea change taking place as it relates to where the U.S. is positioned in terms of the world economy?
Well, I guess you break it down into two. One is that we have had a very long period, more or less ever since the crisis, of exceptionally easy monetary policy, but actually quite tight, austere fiscal policy. And with the latest crisis, you've seen a big shift towards the use of fiscal policy. That is likely to change things up, shake things up a lot. Secondly, crises in general lead to regime changes, to changes in leadership. After 2000, the dot-com bubble, you had 6 or 7 years when Europe very strongly and the emerging markets very strongly outperformed the U.S. when value was fantastic and growth was terrible. Ever since the next financial crisis in 2008, it's been exactly the other way around. When you get to a point when the U.S. is so expensive compared to the rest of the world, you're getting to the point where its own logic it begins to dictate that we need to shift to a different region. So those, I guess that's philosophically the main reasons why I think this needs to happen.
John, I'm just going to quote something from your column. A less laissez-faire, more statist version of capitalism means less in the way of the tactics connected to shareholder value, which you have in quotes, such as share buybacks or private equity buyouts, and also points the way towards outperformance by a different array of countries rather than the US. So where that's not as laissez-faire and less statist should we look?
Okay. In general, again, it's difficult not to feel like Charlie Brown in the football talking about Europe being ready to recover, but there are some critical differences there. That obviously we're going to move in a somewhat more statist direction. What we heard from Joe Biden yesterday, I think, emphasizes that if Democrats get in, we'll be moving in a more statist direction in the States. We won't bother for now to say whether that's a good idea or not. But in general, European countries do a better job of that kind of mixed capitalism than Americans do, and Americans do a better job of laissez-faire capitalism. The other critical point about Europe is that it has actually started to expand, having been much more austere even than the States for many years. There are many problems in Europe. I've written enough about them. We've still got yet another Brexit cliff coming at the end of this year, apart from anything else, and they still have to deal with the structure of the economy. But we're moving into an environment where they ought to be able to perform better, and where obviously they start dramatically cheaper than American stocks. American stocks are, by any measure, expensive.
So, John, as you take a look at the U.S. market here, an argument can be made that, gee, when you strip out those 5, 6, 7 big cap tech names, the market's not that overvalued. How do you kind of think about that?
Certainly that's true as far as it goes. But you do need to make a few points to that. Even if you strip out the big companies, I don't have the numbers to hand, but even if you strip out the so-called FANG or FANAG stocks, whatever you want to call them, the rest of the market still looks darn expensive compared to the rest of the world. You do also have the fact that the way the American market is doing so well is dependent on those few companies, and because of the power of indexing, the importance of passive investing, the fact that so many other companies in the US and their share prices are in large part dependent on what's going on with the FANGs. Should the FANGs return to Earth, that is going to have an effect on the rest of the market. Yes, it's a fair point that there's a limit to how far you can take it. And given that most investors these days do it through ETFs and indexing, it gets very difficult indeed. It's difficult to go. You're making a bet on the US. You're making a bet on.
John, if this rotation, that you write about happens, does it happen slowly, almost so that you wouldn't notice, or is there at some point sort of a massive collective realization and fleeing for the exits?
Probably both. I mean, if you look at, to give you an idea from one of the last regime changes, if you look at the gold price, the early part of the last decade. So we had a few years of people being terrified of inflation and the gold price going ballistic and hitting an all-time high in late 2011. It then drifts downwards for a bit as it becomes sort of inchoately obvious that we're not getting more inflation. And then just ahead of the taper tantrum in 2013, gold has, I remember writing about it at the time, I think it was the worst day in many decades, suddenly in April 2013. So I think it's probably a question of both. It's one of the things we learn about markets in general, that things change slowly and then suddenly all at once. More about math psychology than anything else. So if I had to bet, we're probably going to have a few more years of doubt, and at some point it will become that much clearer that leadership has moved on from states.
John, authors, always provoking thoughts. Thank you very much for joining us. Senior Markets Editor here at Bloomberg and, of course, opinion columnist. He's also author of The Fearful Rise of Markets, and we thank him for joining us. And I just want to, point out once again the comment that John made about Joe Biden. Yesterday, Joe Biden said that the era of, the shareholder being sort of supreme is coming to an end, or should come to an end. And I guess if he becomes president, which, of course, is an unknown right now, then that's what he will set out to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we've heard that a little bit more over the last 6 to 12 months here about other stakeholders in the community, the environment, things like that, not just the shareholder.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I think it was a theme for Davos at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year as well. All right, stay tuned. We have another hour of Bloomberg Markets coming up. We're going to keep you up to date on these mixed markets. The Dow and S&P now higher, the Nasdaq lower. This is Bloomberg.
At the start of every day, you can't...
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Formula One is back.
F1 is back on Sky Sports.
It's lights out, and away we go.
And there's never been a season like this before.
How was that fast?
No one knows where this road leads, but it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Down the inside, oh, he comes down into each other.
Are you ready?
Brilliant madness. An absolutely perfect race.
Watch every race live. Upgrade to Sky Sports F1 today. Go to sky.com/F1 for details.
It's Tune In Sports on this day. On this day in 1999, during the FIFA Women's World Cup final, the U.S. beats China 5-4 on penalties, earning the U.S. women's team their second World Cup title.
Party begins in Pasadena. What a day this was, and it continues from the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. The United States has won the Women's World Cup.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn. To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Home alone or with housemates, stay home as much as possible. Try to allow only people you live with into your home. Wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home and isolate from housemates. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
Companies taking aim at coronavirus vaccines and other treatments.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
It's possible that this is going to be a scarring recession.
The Fed is really showing that they're doing whatever it takes.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
This is really hitting industrial
America, and it's a major crisis.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, earnings begin next week with those big banks, the money center banks. We're going to preview those numbers coming out from the likes of J.P. Morgan and Bank of America. Plus, we're going to take a look at the U.S. municipal bond market, see where some opportunities might be there for investors. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, most stocks are gaining as signs that the world could be closer to an effective treatment of COVID-19 blunted concerns that a rising number of cases will curb the global economic recovery. Let's take a look at the numbers as we do every 15 minutes. The S&P's up 0.2%, up 6. The Dow's up 0.5%, up 144. And the NASDAQ is down 0.2%, down 22. The 10-year is up 3/32 with a yield of 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up over 1% at $40.04 per barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1% at $18.0660 an ounce. The dollar yen, 106.74. The euro, $1.13.18. And the British pound, $1.26.61. U.S. banks had only a few weeks' experience with a full-blown pandemic when they last tried to forecast how bad things would get. Now, they're about to reveal what 3 more months of COVID-19 did to the industry. Second quarter results set for release next week will probably show that trends that took hold at the start of the year only intensified. Surging provisions for loan losses and slumping consumer spending, with trading gains helping some banks weather the storm. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now. Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
And we thank you for that, Greg Jarrett. Let's get now some info on what the small cap universe is doing today. We tend to speak a lot about the larger caps and the growth stocks and so on, but there's growth and value in mid caps too. Dave Wilson, come on in and tell us what's going on.
Well, you've got bigger gains in smaller companies, that's for sure. The Russell 2000 index up 1%, and the S&P 500 is higher by less than 0.2%. Biggest gain in Russell belongs to Matson, whose ticker is MATX. The shipping company has risen 24.5%. Preliminary second quarter earnings beat the highest analyst estimate in a Bloomberg survey. Greenbrier, ticker GBX, has advanced more than 18.5%. The rail car maker's profit and revenue for the fiscal third quarter also exceeded the highest projections. And Every Holdings, ticker EVRI, has added 16.5%. The maker of casino games received a buy rating and new coverage at Roth Capital. The firm set a 12-month share price estimate of $17, the highest in a Bloomberg survey. Now, the Russell steepest decline belongs to Centogene, ticker CNTG. The drug developer has fallen 21% after selling $49 million of new and existing shares. And Redfin, ticker RDFN, has dropped 6.5%. The online real estate broker was cut to the equivalent of whole from buy at RBC Capital Markets.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We appreciate that. You know, we've got the bank earnings beginning next week. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, all the big money center names. That should give us a good sense of kind of where these lenders and capital markets pros kind of look at the markets currently and going forward, to get a sense of kind of what we might be looking at. Allison Williams, she's a senior banks analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence and one of our all-time favorites here. She joins us to talk about the banks. And Allison, it's not so much about earnings, I'm guessing. It's more about kind of how the portfolios and the loans and all that kind of stuff stacking up, and what kind of, I guess, caution you might hear from the banks. What are you going to be looking for next week?
So that's exactly it, Paul, in terms of looking at the underlying trends in the portfolio. So the deferrals, many of which sort of went into place within the last sort of 100 days or so. We're going to see sort of what happened at that 90-day mark, and that's going to give us perhaps a sense of, you know, what percentage of these deferrals are actually moving into delinquencies, modifications, et cetera. Also, we're going to be looking at what's happening in the stress portfolios, and then after these very, very big loss provisions that were expected, how are the banks reserved, and potentially looking at performance in the stress test and sort of worst-case scenarios around losses to get a gauge on that. The positive thing is that estimates have actually been generally moving up into the earnings for revenue, and that's because of the very strong trading quarter. So the fact that these banks have gotten a lot of help from the markets is going to help to somewhat offset those provisions. But, you know, make no mistake, it's going to be a very tough quarter in terms of the earnings decline because of those provisions, and the combination of better trading and markets revenue, worse provisions is really going to make banks like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs stand out in terms of being less bad.
Alison, they, provided, if you like, I know that's not the right word, but so many provisions last time. Can they really have another round of provisions to set aside?
They certainly can, because the expectations have gotten worse since then. I mean, keep in mind, when the banks reported, it was sort of the middle of April, but, most of them made their cut sort of at March 31st. So even as of the April earnings reports, banks were flagging very early on that, look, the provisions are going to incorporate an even more negative scenario likely when we do the cut at June 30th. Keep in mind that we have an accounting change here in the U.S. It basically requires that the banks sort of look out, make an expectation of related to the economy, and then sort of figure out what the over-the-life losses are going to be. So there's a lot more sensitivity to those expectations. And so when we look at the reserving this quarter, we're going to do the same thing we did last in terms of, okay, what are you pricing into those reserves through your accounting in terms of your economic expectations? And then, from there you can kind of figure out as the economy progresses, whether those reserves are enough, too much, or not enough.
So, Alison, is Wells Fargo among the big money center banks? Is Wells Fargo still the one investors are most concerned about?
Wells Fargo is the one with the most concern. They're going to have the toughest quarter, and they're going to cut their dividend when they report this week. Based on our analysis of sort of recent income and looking ahead and trying to figure out if the Federal Reserve limitations there are going to stay intact, we think the dividend cut could be at least 50%. It's also going to depend on the extent to which the bank wants to avoid future cuts. So if they were only looking at this past quarter, it wouldn't be as bad as sort of if they are looking out. But again, that is, people are expecting that for Wells Fargo. I do wonder, once that happens, what is the risk that people start to think about with regard to the other banks? And so that's going to be, I think, a big question on the call in terms of how the banks see Fed scrutiny. All the banks have to resubmit their capital plans. Goldman Sachs is one where their capital cushion is a bit light, but their dividend cushion in terms of income should allow them to keep going. Bank of America is one that throughout the last several years, when a lot of investors wanted them to increase their dividend payout, said, look, we looked at past cycles, banks with a payout of 30% or less didn't have to cut. That's where we're going to stay. And so the interesting thing will be if that strategy works this time, and does that sort of provide the map of the future for banks.
Alison, we're out of time, but will fixed income trading be gangbusters just like last quarter?
It could be even better. It's going to be a very strong quarter for FICC.
Oh, fascinating. Alison Williams there of Bloomberg Intelligence, and we do start off bank earnings seasons again next week. It really only feels like we're just over the last one, but I think there was so much that was so surprising in those reports, Paul, that it sort of took us a while to get used to the new normal. Yeah, and the numbers on those reserves were just extraordinary, and as Alison said, we're going to have more this quarter as well, and it'll be interesting to see kind of some commentary from the likes of Jamie Dimon and some of the other leaders about the kind of how they're viewing the economy going forward. Yeah, and it's at times like this that you really see how the different banks differentiate each other, what their units really are like. So Citi getting about half its revenue from non-US sources, for example, that will be a major differentiator this time around. So that is Bloomberg's Alison Williams. Now let's get to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for some world and national news with Nathan Hager.
Bonnie, thanks. Coronavirus cases continue to climb in the nation's worst hotspots. Florida just reported a 4.9% increase in new cases. That's above the 7-day average, breaking a 4-day streak where increases in Florida had been below that threshold. Hospitalizations are also on the rise, up to another 435. The state has also added 93 deaths. That is below yesterday's all-time high of 120 fatalities in Florida. The ongoing outbreak has many states and cities rolling back reopenings. Dr. Ashish Jha with the Harvard Global Health Institute says they may need to do even more.
I look at Arizona, the 50% restaurant occupancy. That's way too little too late at this point. I think the cat is out of the wet bag in many ways, and the states really have to ratchet back what kind of opening they've done.
Meantime, a reporter at WLNS-TV in Lansing, Michigan is reporting Governor Gretchen Whitmer has signed an executive order requiring people to wear face masks in indoor public spaces starting on Monday. Approval of President Trump's handling of the pandemic is at an all-time low. In a new ABC News Ipsos poll, it finds just 33% of Americans approve the president's COVID-19 response, 67% disapprove. The president's headed to Florida today for a counter-narcotics briefing and a political fundraiser. Before he left, he took a swipe at Joe Biden and his newly released economic recovery plan.
He plagiarized from me, but he can never pull it off. He likes plagiarizing. It's a plan that is very radical left, but he said the right things because he's copying what I've done.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg. Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Business and finance have always held surprises, but this is brand new.
The move risks fueling more demonstrations, and Stokes' concern that essential freedoms will be curbed.
Karen Muskow and Nathan Hager.
Chinese lawmakers approved national security legislation.
Expert navigation through uncharted territory.
Tell us the range of outcomes that we could see on that front.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Economics.
All this doom and gloom was out there.
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Lots and lots of talk about what the Fed should and shouldn't do.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Where are today's real testing grounds for the latest?
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
Minions, did you know Sky Broadband Superfast guarantees your speed? No, Stuart, it doesn't guarantee you'll win the game. Or that your video will go viral. Or that you'll match with the love of your life. But Sky Broadband Superfast does guarantee the speed we promised or money back. So reliable, it's minion-proof. Sky, believe in better. Sky Fibre areas only. Speed measured to hub. Must drop below min download speed for 3 consecutive days. 1 month subscription refund. Claim up to twice in min-term after first fortnight. See sky.com.
Trey Wingo here from ESPN's Golic and Wingo. Every morning, Mike Golic Jr. and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golic and Wingo and start listening today.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir. It's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
Are you ready for the realist first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man. Welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother? Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Brayton and Jared Carrabis cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Indoor gatherings, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Open windows for better ventilation. Try to avoid gathering indoors as much as possible. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P is edging higher, led by the banks. Tech shares are lagging behind, a dynamic that's become increasingly rare as investors have been favoring mega-cap companies seen as insulated from pandemic lockdowns. Gilead Sciences advanced as the company said its remdesivir treatment cut COVID-19 mortality risk by 62%. However, data show record deaths in Florida, Texas, and California from the virus. We check the numbers every 15 minutes. The S&P is currently up 0.3%, up 10. The Dow's up 0.7%, up 180. And the NASDAQ is down just about 0.1%, down 8. The 10-year is up 2/32. The yield is 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude's now up 1.4% at $40.19 a barrel, while COMEX gold's little changed at $18.0450 an ounce. The dollar yen, 106.77. The euro, $1.1314. And the British pound, $1.2653. Alphabet's Google is changing its policies next month to restrict advertising for spyware and other unauthorized tracking technology. The change will prohibit the promotion of products or services that are marketed or targeted with the express purpose of tracking or monitoring another person. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Now on Bloomberg Markets, Munis in Focus.
And this Focus on Munis is brought to you by Build America Mutual. When the market is unpredictable, BAM gives you certainty. BAM insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable rating. Ask your broker about BAM insured municipal bonds. Let's welcome in now Eric Kazatsky of Bloomberg Intelligence. He's a municipal strategist there, to discuss with us some of the states and new tax schemes that will be needed to help fill state coffers. Eric, do states even know yet, given that the pandemic is just hopping from state to state these days?
Good morning. I think some of the things that we're following right now are obviously the resurgence in cases, and it is state-by-state dependent. But I think, when it comes to the municipal finance landscape, the story that is continuing to evolve is, what sort of budget deficits are a lot of these states looking at, and how do they begin to fill them? This is not even taking into account that no formal second stimulus bill that addresses state and local governments has been passed yet. So in order to do that, there have been some tax schemes that have been floated about. In particular, New York is talking about bringing back the stock transfer tax. And that could generate as much as $13 billion it's been discussed as.
All right, so Eric, let's kind of go to that fiscal stimulus plan. Governor Cuomo of New York has for a long time been pushing Congress that it include in the next federal stimulus plan some aid for states and local municipalities. What's the expectation or the belief in the marketplace about whether that will happen and to what extent?
I still think there's a lot of hope as far as muni investors that is going to happen sometime over the next month, 2 months at the latest. The apparent need for a lot of these municipalities, it's very glaring and it's really hard to ignore. But I think we're at the point where recovery is so uncertain as far as the velocity and full timeline that even if they do get some sort of stimulus, and they're talking, let's say a package of approximately $1 trillion, spread across all these municipalities, it still may not be enough given the recovery time that a lot of these places are expecting. And that's why a lot of the states, and New Jersey just came out yesterday, are talking about, obviously, tax increases. And that goes along hand in hand with expenditure cuts. And, two things that no one is a fan of.
What about other states that, are just seeing their problems ramping up now, like Texas and Arizona and California? Well, obviously, California is slightly different, but how are Texas's finances?
Texas is a AAA-rated credit. The school districts are all AAA-rated since they sort of fall in the state-run corpus. So by far and large, they're in very good shape. But I think the problem is, what sort of recovery can they expect going forward, since obviously they don't have an income tax in the state, so they're very dependent on economically sensitive tax streams. And that's something that we're going to be following closely going forward.
So, Eric, just give us some history here. Most states have a balanced budget amendment, right? And so my question is, how firm is that? Can that be waived at any time? Because this seems like an act of God time that if I'm a state, I might try to get a waiver or something?
Yep. Not that I know of. And, look, they have a lot of things they could do creatively to, quote unquote, balance the budget. There's a lot of assumptions that go into budget planning, and a lot of which do not come true when you actually sort of get through the tax year in a normal environment. So I think the ability to present a balanced budget is, in some ways very far removed from what actual tax collections and deficits may be as you go throughout the next fiscal year.
So if New York revives the stock transfer tax, would that set a precedent for other states?
No, I don't know any other states that really have a plan set up like this. And so it's actually, the tax is one that's in place right now, and it generates about, 10 to 13 billion a year, but they fully rebate it back, so it nets to zero. And what's been proposed in the legislature in New York is, non-rebating it and having that obviously flow through to the state to fill the budget hole. The thought is it would obviously impact trading volumes, but if you actually look at the breakdown of what they're charging for the tax, right? So let's say a stock costs $5 per share, you're talking about 1.25 cents, per share on the transfer. It's not that high. It might go largely unnoticed, but you really don't know that until you sort of step out there with that.
So, Eric, just given all that backdrop, how are munis performing in general?
They've still been solid. And, that really goes to show you that people really dislike paying taxes. I think we're starting to see that some credit risk is being repriced in, which, as a fundamental credit analyst, I like to see that because it reflects you're actually getting compensated for risk. Take the state of New York, for example. Spreads shot up, and this is wide for New York, mind you, to 44 basis points for 10-year bonds. Sort of like at the beginning of May, and then they went back down to almost zero again. Now they're back out to plus 30. So on a historical basis, that's wide for the state, because it has such high demand and such high taxes that people are willing to pay up for bonds there. But, seeing those spreads widen out again means that, there is some concern on the horizon.
Eric, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. As always, Eric Kazatsky, municipal strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, giving us some thoughts. Again, some really tough choices coming up for a lot of states across the country as they, face the challenge of balancing their budget in a world where revenues across many states, most states, are just down dramatically. So, as Eric was suggesting, it's some combination for most states of tax increases and cuts in expenditures, neither of which, as Eric, aptly summarized, nobody wants. But that's clearly what a lot of states are going to have to contemplate over the next several months. We'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Traders are concerned on the continued rise in coronavirus cases and its possible impact on the economy. This is keeping a lid on stocks, with the S&P up 0.2%, the Dow gaining 160 points. Gilead said its remdesivir treatment for COVID-19 is linked to a 62% cut in the death rate compared to standard care. Findings from the analysis also showed 74% of remdesivir-treated patients recovered by day 14. Ford could shut down some factories in the U.S. as soon as next week if the state of Chihuahua in Mexico doesn't ramp up its industrial activity. That's according to the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. Ford produces engines in Chihuahua, but the state has limited industrial capacity to 50% in response to the coronavirus. And bankrupt retailer Brooks Brothers has received a higher offer for financing. Bloomberg has learned the investors include Authentic Brands Group. Authentic has a history of buying well-known brands. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
The best of Bloomberg Business Week every business day.
We've got a market sell-off that's spreading around the globe.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, Carol.
The day's breaking global business, finance, and tech news, along with smart analysis.
We know the Fed is going to be sure and steady.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast.
A great scoop on the terminal.
Listen today on BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested?
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality, to make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without? With? Without? With? Without? Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors? The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
How do we control coronavirus now?
Here's Michael, a delivery driver.
All day, every day, I'm seeing people. Last thing I want to do is give anyone coronavirus. So the first sign of a cough, soon as my temperature rises, any loss of taste or smell, I'm staying in, booking a test, only going out to get it done. I mean, you want to know straight away, right? That's how we protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
It's Tune In Sports on this day. On this day in 1999, during the FIFA Women's World Cup final, the U.S. beats China 5-4 on penalties, earning the U.S. women's team their second World Cup title.
Party begins in Pasadena. What a day this was, and it continues from the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. The United States has won the Women's World Cup.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Stick with us. Coming up this half hour, we'll be speaking with Lauren Sauer of Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and coronavirus update and some questions surrounding the WHO. We'll also be talking bond markets with FHN Financial's Jim Vogel. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash from Greg Jarrett.
Bonnie, most U.S. stocks are up as signs the world could be closer to an effective treatment for COVID-19 did blunt some concerns that a rising number of cases will curb the global economic recovery. Let's go ahead and check the markets now, as we have a tendency to do every 15 minutes. The S&P 500 is up 0.3%, up 8. The Dow's up 0.6%, up 156. And the Nasdaq's down 0.1%, down 15. The 10-year is up 1/32. The yield is 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate's up 1.3% at $40.15 per barrel. COMEX Gold is a little changed at $18.0280 an ounce. The dollar yen, 106.77. The euro, $1.1312. The British pound, $1.2644. Virgin Atlantic is closing in on a 400 million pound rescue led by Davidson Kemper Capital Management after the U.S. hedge fund offered more favorable terms than other potential backers. Sources say Davidson Kemper's offered funding on terms that an alliance of Elliott Management and the U.K. investment firm Grable Capital declined to match. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, I guess the narrative about the pandemic right now is one of trying to balance the medical risks of reopening the economy with the economic risk of not reopening the economy, and that's being played out across the country with varying effects. Lauren Sauer, assistant professor of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, joins us on the phone. I should note that the Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Lauren, thanks so much for joining us here. I think the conversation, one of the more recent aspects of this conversation is schools, reopening schools in the fall. What do you think is the most prudent path there?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of conversation about schools and what it means and the pros and cons of reopening. I think everybody wants to see schools reopening, and we understand that not being in school and missing as much classroom time as they have is going to be detrimental to varying degrees to students and kids across the country and truly across the world. The thing is, we have to do it safely, or else we'll just be back in this situation, and it'll be even more disruptive in a few months or next year. So we have to take the time of the summer to plan how to do it safely. Our schools don't have a ton of resources already, so the idea that they could bring in additional resources to do all the things that are being asked of them to bring kids back safely is really hard.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that, one child gets it and that's school done for a long time, right, Lauren?
Yeah, I think we're still trying to understand how virus transmission happens in kids and what it looks like. We know that in general, kids seem to have less severe disease, but we are still doing a lot of work on how transmissible it is in kids and how they spread the virus. And we also have to think about the parents and the teachers and the administrators in these schools and how it could impact them if they have a sick kid who maybe is asymptomatic and brings the virus to school, and then all of a sudden all your teachers are sick and several of your kids are sick, and then their parents and their families get sick too.
Yeah.
So, Lauren, what's the latest thinking on second wave? I mean, here in the New York metropolitan area, I think we've generally done quite a good job, as well as in Massachusetts, even in Maryland, and where you are. Is it still fair to think about a second wave? Because I look what's happening in California and Florida and Texas, and to me, that is not so much as a second wave, but almost their first wave, quite frankly. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think most places we're not feeling like we're out of the first wave. I think there's been a lot of talk about second wave, but when we're seeing 60,000 cases or more across the country, and having repeatedly having our largest days of increased cases, it's hard to think about that as a second wave. I think there will be a second wave, but I think we have to get to the end of the first wave first, and I don't think we're there yet.
Lauren, what do you make of the idea that airborne particles now should be looked at? The WHO had been, refusing, or at least sort of not really taking it up seriously, and there's a growing consensus now that perhaps it should.
Yeah, several hundred scientists wrote a letter, I believe, to the New York Times indicating that they wanted the WHO to take the role of airborne particles more seriously in the spread of COVID-19. And I think the guidance has changed a bit, and the WHO's thinking has changed a bit. We are continually learning about the virus and how it spreads. I still do believe that droplet transmission, so those bigger droplets, are what's driving the bulk of transmission, and I think there is a role for aerosol transmission or airborne transmission, but it's in specific circumstances like inside, close quarters, things like singing or loud talking or yelling, places where the ventilation is not great. So there are specific circumstances where those are going to be the drivers. That aerosol transmission is going to be the driver, but it's those very specific circumstances.
Lauren, you were just mentioning the World Health Organization. How important is it that the U.S. is pulling out of the WHO?
I hope that it doesn't happen. I think it's incredibly important to put resources towards making sure that it doesn't happen and that we truly evaluate the impact of a decision like that. We will lose a lot of access to a lot of international expertise, a lot of international information, global collaboration around the exact thing that we are having such a hard time handling here in the U.S. right now. So it will impact our ability to manage and understand the seasonal flu vaccines, the potential for COVID vaccines, global therapeutic trials, all of those things the WHO has a very large role in, and we support the WHO and we participate through our relationship with the WHO and our role in the WHO. And so the idea that we would pull out simply because of a disagreement on how this COVID-19 response has been managed by them is truly unbelievable and very, very short-sighted.
Briefly, Lauren, do you stop getting updates on the latest science if you pull out of the WHO, or are they not obliged to sort of share it with the world anyway?
They're obliged to share it with the world, but we would receive that information purely as a recipient, just like anyone else. But we currently have a role at the table in decision-making, in primary information sharing and information gathering, and supporting policy development, supporting operational response decisions. And all of those things, we would simply be on the receiving end of the actions, not as an active and willing participant, and not as a global public health authority. So when you're not in the beginning edge of that conversation, you have no say in how the conversation plays out until you're at the end of it.
Wow. All right, Lauren, thank you. Always learn something new from our conversations. Lauren Sauer is Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and, of course, the Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP, Bloomberg Philanthropies and Bloomberg News. Let's get to Washington, D.C. now, our 99.1 studios, and Nathan Hager.
Bonnie, there is little let up to the coronavirus surge in this country. Arizona just reported another 3.7% increase in COVID-19 cases. That matched the previous 7-day average. The state added another 44 deaths as well, bringing its fatality total to 2,082. The Trump administration is putting pressure on schools to reopen with in-person classes this fall. Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine says it'll be up to individual school districts in his state.
Now, we've given them some very strong guidelines. We've said that every employee at school needs to wear a mask. We have said we highly recommend that every student from 3rd grade up wear a mask. And we've also said, look, many schools will require kids at kindergarten to wear a mask.
Vice President Mike Pence is leading another meeting of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. President Trump is headed to Florida for an anti-drug trafficking event and a political fundraiser. Florida's one-day COVID-19 case count went back above the 7-day average today, up another 4.9%. The ACLU is suing North Carolina over a requirement that mail-in absentee ballots include a signature from a witness. The civil rights group filed the case on behalf of several voters, including some with chronic health problems. The lawsuit says the rule would needlessly put voters at risk of exposure to COVID-19 at a time when cases and deaths may be soaring. Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan says wearing a mask will be key to economic growth. In a Fox Business interview, he said the primary economic policy from here is broad mask wearing. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
The doors are open.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close and And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up into Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
Trey Wingo here from ESPN's Golic and Wingo. Every morning, Mike Golic Jr., and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golic and Wingo and start listening today.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Home alone or with housemates, stay home as much as possible. Try to allow only people you live with into your home. Wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home and isolate from housemates. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn. Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Ready to talk brass tacks on what's happening in Major League Baseball? Turn to the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs for daily statistics, analysis, and commentary.
One team will say, yeah, we're going to keep paying minor leaguers their stipend, and another team will say, we're going to extend the stipend through this month, and then another team will say, nope, we're cutting them off. So are extending it at least through August, which would basically be the end of the minor league regular season.
Search Effectively Wild on TuneIn to listen.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P has edged higher, led by the banks. Tech shares are down, a dynamic that's become rare as investors favored mega-cap companies seen as insulated from pandemic lockdowns. Gilead Sciences advanced, as the company said, its remdesivir treatment to cut COVID-19 mortality risk by 62%. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is in the green, up 0.4%, up 13. The Dow's up 0.8%, up 200 now. The NASDAQ is little changed, up 3. The 10-year is up 230 seconds with a yield of 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 1.3% at $40.14 a barrel. COMEX gold is little changed at $18.03 per ounce. The dollar yen is currently at 106.76. The euro is $1.13.18. The British pound, $1.26.52. The exponential jump in COVID-19 cases around the U.S. over the past month may prompt higher credit losses for banks with the highest concentration of deposits in the hardest-hit geographies, that according to Morgan Stanley. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
exactly is going on in bond markets here in the United States? If you give your money away to the U.S. government for 10 years, you get 60 basis points right now, which doesn't seem like a whole lot. Let's bring in someone who's been working in the field for a long time. Jim Vogel is FHN Financial Capital Markets, and he joins us from Memphis, Tennessee. Of course, FHN is a national fixed income dealer, as we all know. Jim, are you bored right now? Let's just be blunt about it. Are there interesting moves in the bond markets right now, or are you just waiting for the Fed to start getting out of the way so that other buyers have influence again?
Well, this week has been interesting because as we came into the third quarter, people were concerned that we may not see demand at Treasury auctions to finance all the stimulus spending. Instead, we've seen an excellent response to the Treasury supply, even as it grows every single month. And that's translated into lower interest rates because the fear of supply is diminished.
So, Jim, let's talk about the Fed here. The phrase I'd like to use, and people listening kind of know this, is the Fed's kind of backstopping the market here. How long do you think they can continue to do that?
2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years.
Well, yes. They've got a proven track record of managing expectations that long, and there's going to be a long period of time before people are convinced that the economy can recover to the point that inflation is going to return and send rates up from obviously low levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The Fed, literally with its forecast, has sort of hinted at 2 to 3 years, if not explicitly outright said it. But it will only take for the market to get a whiff of inflation at some point, if we get a few more gangbusters, jobs numbers, or what have you, for the curve to steepen quite sharply again, right, Jim? Have you seen this before? Is it an actual risk?
Oh, absolutely. Curve steepening is the question, really, for at least the next 6 months, if not for an extended period into 2021, which is why it's so interesting that this week we absorbed the long part of the Treasury supply. Their Treasuries were sort of left by the side of the road during the stock market excitement during the second quarter. And now Treasuries aren't necessarily rebounding, but they're certainly getting a lot more attention than they did over the previous 2 months.
So, Jim, right now, given where we stand, given kind of the economic outlook, given some of the uncertainties about some of these states that are seeing a surge in cases, where do you see value or opportunity in the fixed income markets today?
You have to pay very careful attention and try to find the best corporate bonds that you can. If you are trying to produce a little bit extra yield, you've got to consider lower coupon mortgage-backed securities. But then in terms of the all-important yield curve strategy, all of our work this week that tested different scenarios suggested that concentrating around the 7-year is a great place for an awful lot of intermediate bond portfolios to concentrate.
Around the 7-year. That's interesting. Well, who would they be? Talk to us about flows. Brian Chapata had a nice column today about pension funds and, how it's conceivable that they could actually sort of do to debt markets what they used to be able to do or are able to do to equity markets, and that is move the market. Did you see it? What did you make of that idea, or what do you make of that idea, Jim?
Pension funds are critical, particularly at the long end of the market. They are critical to the credit markets in terms of their demand there. But in terms of current flows, the massive size away from the Fed is from households that have basically put their spare cash, to the extent it's not in stocks, into mutual funds and into bank deposits. The bank deposit growth, even taking out some of the stimulus payments, et cetera, has been extraordinary this year.
Jim, we're several months into this pandemic and several months into the economic fallout from it. What's your thought about credit quality? We're going to see the banks report next week, and they're going to set aside some more big reserves. But as you look across your portfolio, are you starting to see some concerns as it relates to credit quality?
Not yet, because the big worry about credit quality in a recession is that the taps get turned off too quickly. And so that it's really not a credit problem, it's a liquidity problem. And that's certainly what aggravated the financial crisis 12 years ago. Here, we've got plenty of liquidity, thanks to the Fed and to those flows that we've already talked about. And so we will not see the real credit problems outside specific industries develop probably until early part of next year. So we'll be looking for signs that credit might deteriorate. But right now, people have banked, in effect, so much debt on their balance sheet that they won't need to come to market to raise new funds unless the economy improves and they start spending those dollars again.
Jim, what coronavirus data do you watch to give you any hint about what might happen in the Treasury market?
We look very carefully at transmission rates by state. We look very carefully at what we call real-time mortality rates and how they are shifting as Sunbelt states undergo a tremendous increase in their cases. And the bond market has been watching, in effect, a slower pace of COVID-19 statistics compared with the stock market that reacts every single day to daily data. Unfortunately, from an economic perspective, daily data are just too erratic and have too many reporting lags and errors to really be a dependable source for what's happening in the bond market.
So right here, what are some sectors, Jim, on the corporate side? You mentioned you might have to go to the corporate side to get some yield. Are there some sectors that you find attractive here?
You've got to keep looking at the pharmaceuticals. Obviously, the tech sector never really needs cash, but there's an awful lot of attractive paper out there. And then you have to selectively look at lower-rated industrials when they get out of line with stock market performance. So in particular, you want to try to take advantage of wider credit spreads down the curve or down the credit curve when stock market volatility rises.
Well, it's always a tutorial to speak with Jim Vogel, I have to say. Jim, thank you. How are things in Memphis, very briefly?
Quite well. We had a spike, as many places did in the South, in recent weeks, and that appears to have leveled off. Thanks.
Well, stay safe. Jim Vogel is with FHN Financial Markets, and obviously it's a primary dealer. And Jim has been steeped in Treasury market activity for a little while now.
Yeah, it's great to speak to Jim and kind of looking at, he's saying if you need yield here, you might have to look on the corporate credit side, given where Treasury rates are. So we'll certainly pay attention to that. Coming up, Balance of Power with David Weston. For Vonnie Quinn, I'm Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. At the start of every day, you can't predict exactly.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Nothing phases the money combo because his bills are under control with Money Supermarket. Even this. The dentist, not a flicker of anxiety. Fox is making love. This laugh. He's calmer than a banana. So, be like the money calm bull. Get money calm. Money Supermarket.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
This is Darren Waller. Good to have you.
Yes, sir. It's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, and CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
Who says only the experts get to do the talking? On the Scuttle Puck NHL Hockey Podcast, irreverent outsiders Mike Bond and Dale Horde give their untrained opinions on all things hockey from the fans' perspective.
I don't know how you get those guys out of there. And Crosby, as great as he's been, it's just such a different era, so it's tough with the... he didn't have the crazy number of points that Orr, Lemieux, and Gretzky did.
Search Scuttle Puck on TuneIn to listen.
Come on the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our radio and TV audiences worldwide, this is Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. Well, even before 2020 began, Eurasia Group took a look around the world and ranked as the #1 global risk the possibility that the U.S. presidential election this fall would not be seen as legitimate. And nothing much has happened so far in 2020 to really take that risk down. We welcome now Eurasia Group President and Founder Ian Bremmer. So, Ian, take us back before this cataclysmic year. What did you see coming up? Why is this year different from 4 years ago or 8 years ago?
Well, because the country is incredibly divided, and we have a president that has been making every political noise that the election is going to be rigged against him, the dirty tricks campaign. And we saw that in 2016 that there was Russian interference that President Obama at the time didn't do very much about. We've not been able to handle having a free and fair election without external intervention, even when both sides were perfectly well prepared to play by the rules. We now have a situation, even before the pandemic hit, where that's much more problematic, where issues of saying that there's voter fraud happening, impersonation, you shouldn't be doing vote by mail. I mean, all of the efforts with a president who's well behind in the polls right now, but has the ability to help shape the outcomes of the way the election itself is put together. In the world's largest economy, the idea that the election will be contested and that half of the population will think it's rigged, even before the pandemic hit, we thought that was the single largest risk affecting the markets for 2020. Of course, the pandemic makes this a lot worse.
So, Ian, it strikes me that in 2016, I think most of us weren't really thinking that much about possibly the election being contaminated by social media and misinformation, Russia really trying to intervene in the election. Now we know what happened. We have a much better sense of what happened. Why have it spent 4 years, and have we really made any progress in trying to reduce that risk? And if not, why not?
We've made no progress. And one reason is because Congress was so divided. I mean, there have been efforts to get billions of dollars for proper election security through Senate. That's not being aired to a vote because the head of the Senate doesn't want it to, Mr. McConnell. President Trump certainly understands that to the extent there was Russian intervention, it probably helped him, and it didn't help Hillary Clinton. Let's keep in mind that the failed impeachment, Trump was impeached, of course, it feels like ages ago. In reality, it was just a few months, but it was not convicted by the Senate. He was acquitted. That was a process to engage in external intervention on the part of the Ukrainian government to politicize an investigation against the likely opponent, who now is the soon-to-be presumptive nominee against Trump in this election. I mean, when you have all of that happening, again, well before you talk about a reality where we're going to have a pandemic, people will be very uncomfortable actually showing up to vote. You're going to have massive efforts to do absentee balloting in swing states that don't have a good record of getting that done well. Certainly unless it is a blowout for Trump or against Trump, the likelihood that we know who's going to win this election on the day after is quite low. The likelihood that it's contested is actually quite high.
So, Ian, there is some breaking news right now that you'll be interested in. It's not a big shock, I suspect, but nonetheless, it's important. The president, as you know, is down in Florida right now visiting Southern Command, and he now has made remarks and said that a Phase 2 China deal is unlikely at this point. I mean, a lot of people thought this was an uphill fight to get a Phase 2 trade deal anyway, but now the president is conceding it. What do you make of that? What does this do to President Trump's overall strategy of dealing with China?
Well, so, David, when I've spoken to the White House of late, they've told me that they thought the likelihood that even the Phase 1 trade deal would stay in place through the elections was just under 50%, 51% that it would break. With the exception of the Phase 1 deal, David, every single piece of the U.S.-China relationship is right now heading into the toilet. And, you know, look at Hong Kong, look at the Uyghurs. Look at American sanctions against the Chinese on Hong Kong in Senate passed 100-0. You don't see 100-0 in the Senate on anything these days. You see it against China. Look at technology, Huawei. Look at the desire to have investigations into the Chinese cover-up of the initial virus outbreak. The President Trump saying that we're leaving the World Health Organization. The South China Sea confrontation between the United States and Chinese military, also Taiwan. I mean, you cannot find an issue out there that the two countries, the two largest economies of the world, are moving in a positive direction. And indeed, the Phase 1 trade deal, which heretofore had been a signature achievement of President Trump and President Xi, has been holding on by a thread. So I think the real question, you're right, I'm not at all surprised that Trump is saying there's no Phase 2 deal. The real question is, does the Phase 1 deal unwind? The markets won't like that. The corporates won't like it. And frankly, one reason why it's been in place and it stays in place is because the voters are going to be hurt by the additional tariffs that would come if Phase 1 breaks apart. And I suspect that Trump really doesn't want that. You may remember just about a week ago when Peter Navarro, the senior advisor, said that the Phase 1 deal was dead, that President Trump got on Twitter within a couple of hours, fairly late at night, and said, no, it's all okay. So I think that's the real question here.
So, Ian, it strikes me, I mean, we had a Cold War with the Soviet Union, as it was then called, but we didn't have a lot of trade and economic integration with the Soviet Union coming out of World War II. If we entered something like a Cold War with China, this is quite different, isn't it? Because this is the number one and the number two economy in the world that are fairly integrated, despite a lot of the stresses and strains along the way. How does that play out?
You know, it's different, and yet there are some analogies. The big analogy is that the United States and China are also, you know, creating more data than other countries in the world. They have the biggest tech firms of any countries in the world, and yet they are functionally not integrated at all. And that's forcing countries around the world. The Italians just came out and said that they're not going to allow Huawei in their telecom process. You've seen the UK, Canada, Australia, a number of other countries are basically saying they're going to have to choose the American or the Chinese system. So that feels more like the U.S. versus Soviet Cold War. But no matter where U.S. relations with the Chinese go, I suspect that if you and I were going to walk into a Walmart in 5 years' time, we'd still be buying a lot of Chinese goods. I suspect that if we go to a university in 5 years' time, we're still going to see that the lion's share of $41 billion that comes from foreign students is going to be coming from the Chinese. We may kick them out of some of the advanced classes in AI in Caltech and in MIT, but I don't think we're going to suddenly say we don't want those students coming in. And let's keep in mind, the United States is still a free market, and much of our policy and our regulatory environment is captured by special interests that make money off of it. And there's a lot of money that still is being made by integration of the U.S. economy with China. So no matter how bad, I do think that buffers the question of how bad the relationship between the United States and China can actually get in a way that it did not between the Americans and the Soviets.
Yeah, Ian, just briefly here at the end, put these two things together, the possibility of questions about the legitimacy of our election and the real reshuffling of global politics here. What does it do to our standing in the world, not just with China, but in the world, if really there are substantial questions about our election?
there's no question that the United States is no longer seen as a leader the way that we have been. I just saw a stat earlier today that 9 in 10 Canadians think that they shouldn't reopen the border with the United States right now. And Canada, right? I mean, you see stuff like this. It doesn't feel like the United States is leading anyone by example. And that's an unfortunate reality, because soft power for the United States has helped us get what we want. But I think we should also recognize there's a reason why the president of Mexico just came up and did nice with President Trump, and that's because the United States is vastly more powerful than Mexico. And most of our allies and our antagonists around the world still understand that the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency, still understand the United States is overwhelmingly the most important military player in the world. There are other things, too. So I wouldn't overstate the idea that the erosion of American legitimacy in terms of our representative democracy feeling broken and rigged is suddenly going to mean that America doesn't matter anymore on the global stage.
Ian, it is always so informative to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Ian Brummer. He is the founder and the president of Eurasia Group. Coming up here, we're going to talk with Phil Murphy, governor of New Jersey, about his fight with the coronavirus. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
And action!
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality, to make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors?
Sweet.
The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
As shops open up again, how do we all stay safe? Fontaine runs a craft store.
We've made the shop COVID safe. If you can't keep 2 meters apart, make sure it's 1 meter with extra precautions. Know the number of customers allowed in at any one time. Use the hand sanitizer at the entrance and use contactless payments. I'm loving serving customers again, but please, to keep us open, we've all got to keep to the guidelines.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Thanks to National Lottery players, the Emerald Centre are now providing emergency food supplies and support for people in Bedfordshire like Alan.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere. Delivery.
Oh, great. Can you leave it round the back, please?
Sure, no problem. And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
Stay close to college hoops conversation with the College Basketball Talk podcast from NBC Sports. Join Rob Doster and Bobby Reagan for weekly recaps of what's happening in every conference, nostalgic flashbacks to classic games, and big picture discussions on the future of the sport.
Yes, they found a way to ensure that there was a financial incentive for be able to get paid for K to go there, if that makes sense. But it's not, there was still a recruitment involved, right? Let me think about it like this.
Search College Basketball Talk on TuneIn to listen.
He tends to be coming back in his state despite all that he and his state have done to fight it off.
The toll has been enormous, over 13,000 confirmed deaths and probably at least a couple more thousand that are suspected also to have passed from COVID-19. That's the awful tragedy. Our numbers have gotten a lot better. And so as they got better, we made the decision based on the facts and the science to begin step-by-step reopening our state. So we knew when we were doing that, doing it responsibly, I hope at every step, that we would take on more risk in terms of increasing the potential for transmission. We were comfortable with that risk. What we were not expecting was the explosion in cases elsewhere in the country. And so the rate of transmission has gotten a little bit uncomfortably high for us, just over 1. Today it improved slightly. And so we put in with New York and Connecticut a travel advisory for folks to self-quarantine if they're coming back into our state from a hotspot. As your colleague noted, and by the way, I welcome her to New Jersey as a resident, we are now requiring face coverings outdoors. Those are 2 steps that we've taken over the past 10 days or so. We've held off on indoor dining, which brings me no joy, but it's quite clear that this virus is a lot more lethal inside than it is outside. And so we're watching this minute to minute, and again, trying to make the decisions at every step based on the facts.
He was, by the way, welcoming our colleague, Caroline Hyde, who's just moved to New Jersey. But in addition to the human toll the governor talked about, he also talked about what it's done to his budget. And I asked him why he felt so badly pressed with his budget, despite the fact that they will actually have a balanced budget this year in New Jersey.
It's balanced because it's constitutional. It's a constitutional requirement. But in order to get our budget balanced, literally only for 3+ months, David, we had to cut or defer $5.2 billion of expenses. The nut for New Jersey, we have estimated between mid this year and the end of 2021 is $20 billion. That's the amount of that's how overwhelming this crisis has been, both in expenses that have exploded and revenues that have fallen off the table.
Are you going to have to borrow money? And if so, what does your access look like to the municipal bond market at this point? New Jersey has not always had the best credit.
Yeah, we will have to borrow money. This is not either or, it's and both. And we'll probably have to put some revenue raisers on the table as well as we develop our next budget. The first place we'll go is the Federal Reserve special program that they've set up. And that'll be the first port of call. And we'll go from there. But this is going to be and both. Borrowing, I'm sure, in the billions and needing federal cash assistance. And again, we're not alone. This is an American challenge right now, and sadly, we're seeing this virus explode around the country. The other states are in our prayers. We wish nothing but a speedy resolution, but it's a reminder that we're all in the same boat together.
So I don't want to borrow from Peter to pay Paul, as they say, but is there any possibility of increased tax revenues coming to New Jersey? Because you have a lot of people, including someone working at Bloomberg, I have to tell you, who are doing their work from New Jersey, where otherwise they'd be in Manhattan.
Yes, the answer, I assume, is yes. But, you know, in so many respects, as New York goes, New York City in particular goes, a big bulk of New Jersey goes. So I don't wish any ill will whatsoever across the Hudson to our friends. But there is no question there's been a big work from home trend. The real estate market in the commuting suburbs has gotten very hot in the midst of this crisis. Again, we are overwhelmingly all in this together, and we've done an enormous amount with New York, in particular, Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio, and our neighbors in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware. We are in so many respects, we're the densest region in America. We're all in this together.
We're speaking with Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey on Bloomberg Television and Radio. You mentioned the real estate market a moment ago. Give us a sense of both the commercial and the residential. You said it's hot. Are you seeing prices go up, commercial, residential?
Without question, residential, particularly in the communities that are easily commutable into New York. Commercial, I think it's too early to tell. I do believe that there is going to be a revisiting of some of what we had heretofore thought over the past couple of years of the stranded assets, the suburban mall, the low-slung sort of spaceship 3-story corporate headquarters, which our state was known for so long. There was a period of time here where folks looked at those assets and said, listen, the world has moved to a different place, a different paradigm. I believe strongly not only will those assets be now looked at again with perhaps a different set of eyes, but they are being looked at, to be determined.
Finally, Governor Murphy, let's turn to politics, but everything is affected by the pandemic. You've just had a primary in New Jersey. The reports were an awful lot of mail-in ballots were used, and it's delayed a lot of the results. There have even been some challenges already. Looking forward to November, what does that tell us about what the elections are going to look like in this age of the pandemic?
A good question. Too early to tell, David, on November, but we tried in this primary. First of all, we moved our primary from June 2nd to this week, July 7th, and we went to a hybrid model. Everyone, if you were registered as a Democrat or Republican, you were mailed a ballot. Self-addressed stamp envelope, you just returned the ballot. If you were not registered, you got an application for a ballot. And at the same time, we asked each of our 21 counties to have 50% capacity for in-person voting on election day, and every municipality to have at least one location. It's too early to tell for sure, but we think it worked out quite well. You know, we're trying to balance the sacred right in democracy to vote and to have every vote counted, and at the same time, the realities of public health today. So too early to tell on what November looks like, but we think based on all the evidence we have so far that the primary worked out quite well.
But do you have to take special precautions on the voter fraud claims? Because there are a lot of claims coming in about voter fraud. Generally, people think there isn't that much of it. But you have to ramp up and actually invest more in making sure you protect the system in November?
Oh, listen, we did it in this primary. In fact, in their plain clothes, we had National Guard members up and down the state. I'm fearful, and by the way, we take every one of these claims seriously, and we run them to ground. We've had an enormous amount of back and forth with the U.S. Postal Service, not on fraud, but on delivery and timing of delivery. I'm fearful that the fraud point is a political talking point more than it is a reality. So I'll just say that. But we take every one of these instances deadly seriously.
Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community. Support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
How long will it take for the economy to recover?
How many of them have remained on the job throughout this?
People are not going to be in public transportation.
Nobody knows.
You have received £600 million from the UK.
But we can promise the most complete information and the most detailed analysis.
The question is, what kind of recovery will it be?
Through every twist and turn.
Would you be wary of investment in China at this point?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's high time we got a market check, and for that we go to Scarlett Fu.
Hi there, David. Yeah, we're looking at stocks turning around from earlier losses, and it's interesting because it's not the usual suspects leading the way higher. In fact, if you look at the NASDAQ, it is lagging behind, and of the 5 biggest members of the NASDAQ 100, 2 of them are rising, the other 3 are down. So that's unusual from what we've seen in the past. Of course, the day started off with a fairly negative tone because Chinese government funds decided to unload some of their positions, cooling down that very hot market. Now, one thing I'm paying attention to are the technicals. Abigail and her fellow technical analysts call it a golden cross when the S&P 500's short-term trend line breaks above the long-term trend line, and that has not happened since late March. According to Sundial Capital Research, these golden crosses for the S&P 500 have corresponded with the end of every major bear market in the last 7 decades. Of course, this has been a pretty unusual bear market because everything's been on warp speed, but today feels a little bit like early June all over again. You've got cyclicals like energy and financials leading the way higher. Even Hertz is moving higher, and cruise line operators. I'm focused on the big banks here because, of course, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo will be announcing earnings early next week, Tuesday before the bell. Even with all of this, David, safety is back in demand because gold, while it's backed off from $1,800 an ounce, it is still up for the week. Copper doing even better because of supply disruptions, and plenty of demand there for TLT, the longer-dated Treasuries ETF. David?
Thank you so much, Scarlett, for that update on the markets. And a programming now, we'll go over all the things that happened this week and how they affected markets on Wall Street week. That's coming up at 6 p.m. Eastern time this evening. We'll be joined by Larry Summers, our regular contributor, as well as Dan Tarullo, former Fed Reserve member. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are posting gains on signs we could be close to a coronavirus treatment. The Dow is up 241 points, S&P up 16, NASDAQ climbing 4 points. Shares of Gilead Sciences are up after it released test data showing its remdesivir reduced the death rate by 62% compared to patients receiving standard care. Citibank has raised its price target for Amazon to the highest on Wall Street at $3,550 a share. Citi says it expects e-commerce sales to rise 43% by 2022. And a Federal Reserve official says what the U.S. needs for an economic recovery is another financial rescue from Congress and more mask wearing. Robert Kaplan, the president of the Dallas Fed Bank, says if we do that well, the economy will grow faster and have a lower unemployment rate. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Reopenings.
Is there a likelihood that we have a sustained recovery?
Requirements.
Lawmakers have passed sweeping legislation.
Returns.
The president signed an executive order.
Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
We continue our Bloomberg radio team coverage.
Everything you need now.
Let's head to Washington now.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We have some breaking news now. We just talked to Governor Phil Murphy yesterday of New Jersey, and he said that they were having trouble with their budget. They were going to have to borrow some money. Well, he now has said he's going to borrow the money. New Jersey lawmakers and Governor Murphy have now agreed on a plan to borrow up to $9.9 billion. We asked him if he were going to have to do that. He said yes, but he's also going to have what he called revenue enhancers. I think that's a euphemism for taxes and fees. So that's the latest news out of New Jersey. And now, for First Word News, we go to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. Florida continues to be one of the country's hotspots for the coronavirus. The state says new cases rose 4.9% in the past 24 hours. Bars, restaurants, and gyms began reopening in May, and weeks later, Florida began experiencing an alarming surge in cases. From Miami to Jacksonville and Tampa, hospitals in June and July have seen their numbers of coronavirus patients triple. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is criticizing an independent United Nations human rights experts report about an American drone strike that killed a top Iranian general in January. The report said the incident that killed Hassem Soleimani was a, quote, watershed event in the use of drones and amounted to a violation of international law. Secretary Pompeo called the report spurious and said it gives more cause to, quote, distrust UN human rights mechanisms. President Trump says he's looking at pardoning his former aide and longtime confidant, Roger Stone, who got more than 3 years in prison for lying to Congress and witness tampering. The president told reporters today that Stone was treated badly by prosecutors. He's scheduled to report to prison next week. Notre Dame Cathedral will be rebuilt just the way it stood before last year's devastating fire. No swimming pool or organic garden on the roof of the medieval Paris monument or contemporary glass spire. And to stay historically accurate, it will again be built with potentially toxic lead. That's the verdict reached by French President Emmanuel Macron and the officials in charge of reconstruction following that April 2019 fire. President Macron wants the landmark reopened in time for the 2024 Olympics. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thank you so much, Mark. Well, Vice President Biden is ahead of President Trump in the polls pretty much across the country these days, although President Trump still seems to have the edge when it comes to trusting him with respect to the economy. The former Vice President tried to address that yesterday as he rolled out his new economic plan, at least the first parts of it. He called it the Build Back Better plan. We welcome now Rick Davis. He's Bloomberg political contributor of Stone Court Capital. So, Rick, give us your sense of this. I guess it's a progressive plan, but it's not too progressive.
Well, it's populist rhetoric wrapped in a pretty moderate economic plan. I mean, he goes right after Trump on key themes like Buy America. I mean, basically what we saw is Vice President Biden's Buy America plan versus Donald Trump's Make America Great Again. And he goes after him on some really interesting economic issues like basically nationalism and building a strong infrastructure and manufacturing base in America. And we heard all those things from Donald Trump back in 2016 during his campaign, and now Biden is basically trying to usurp some of those issues for himself.
Well, that's what I find interesting, and you were such an accomplished political strategist, having run John McCain's presidential campaign. Is it a good strategy to say, basically, I agree with him on the issues, I just disagree with him on execution? Because they basically agree we're not going to be big free traders, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. They basically agree they don't like China very much. Both of them. Both agree we want a lot more manufacturing. So where's the disagreement? How do I pick between them?
Yeah, I think that one of the things he did, and I think he did a very effective job of this in his speech, is he basically tagged all this to the coronavirus controversy. And he basically said that Trump's mishandling of the coronavirus has made the economic downturn worse than it would have otherwise been. And so, therefore, he's unqualified to serve another term, and you need to give me a chance to dig out of this economic downturn by, in fact, as you describe it, doing some of the exact same things Trump promised to do, but on issues like infrastructure and offshoring jobs, what Biden's saying is he failed to keep those promises, and I will actually deliver on that.
We still have almost 4 months to the election, which is, we keep saying, an eternity in politics. At the same time, it appears that Joe Biden seems to have pretty good lead, including in a lot of the battleground states at this point. Take us into the strategist's mind here. How risky is that to sort of sit on a lead? What do you do that you don't do something aggressive and lose it, but on the other hand, you don't just get complacent?
Well, I think one of the things that he's done with this economic speech is starting to fill in some of the blanks, right? He did exactly what you described, which is basically having a basement strategy for the first, 2 quarters of this year, where he respected the coronavirus limitations on his campaign and allowed basically Trump to either succeed or fail with his governance over the coronavirus and the economy. And basically Trump has failed. So now Biden sees an opportunity to emerge and start talking about substantive issues that he will do as a governing party and unite the party around some of these central themes. And obviously the economy is one of those central items that he has to convince Americans that he could govern as effectively as Donald Trump when the economy was roaring. And so I think you start to see that sort of filling in the blanks. So he's got a lead in almost every targeted state